As a so-called professional joiner, I am constantly in the dilemma of whether or not I should buy stuff from IKEA or just make stuff myself. And I'm also constantly asked by customers who maybe they'll pop out to IKEA to buy a unit and the unit's like a tiny bit too wide or too narrow, and they'll come to me and say, I've seen this unit in IKEA for 50 quid. I need one a little bit wider. Can you make it for me, and how much will it cost? And they're expecting it to be about 50 quid. In fact, often people will expect it to be cheaper for some reason. In this video, I'm going to attempt to explain my views on whether to buy something from IKEA or get it custom made by a professional joiner. As you will have seen if you've been following me on Instagram and Twitter and whatnot, I'm in the middle of a bit of a room swap at the minute. And as you can see, I've got this horrific mess of stuff that needs to be stored somewhere, and I've run out of space, so I need yet another shelving unit. So a little unit about here should do the job. And I've got a full joinery workshop. I've got loads of spare wood. I've got loads of spare paint. I could easily make this myself. But instead I've gone out to IKEA and bought a unit, a little, what is it? Kallax shelving unit. So I'm going to explain why, as a joiner with his own workshop, I've still gone out to IKEA and bought a unit. Now, what I don't want to do in this video is get into any of the political kind of globalization debate and stuff like that, because it's too big a topic for this channel. Maybe it's a debate for another day, because I don't know the answer to that. But all I want to look at is from a purely economical standpoint. Is it better for me to buy a unit from IKEA, or is it better for me to make it myself? And is it better for you to buy a unit from IKEA, or is it better for you to make it yourself? And I'm going to attempt to explain that in the time it takes me to make this unit, which hopefully isn't very long, because I need to crack on. So, as you might have guessed, I've made a little spreadsheet to work this out. And before I forget, a copy of this spreadsheet is over on my Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/GosforthHandyman, if you want to have a play with this spreadsheet, you can do. I'll upload it onto there. And I'll also include a little video explaining my costs to build a similar unit to this, so you can kind of get an understanding of why it would cost a lot of money for me to make one of these. But let's just go through from the top of this spreadsheet. We'll just pop me in the bottom left corner here so you can see how I'm getting on. I'm going to start off with some simple hourly rate figures. So I'm going to assume you're on about £15 an hour, which is about 30 grand a year, which is about the average wage in the UK. You pop into that box whatever hourly rate you are on, whether it's £5 an hour or £200 an hour, whatever, you pop it into that box there. You're then going to need to take a stab in the dark guess at what your joiner's hourly rate is. We'll pop in £40 an hour as a starting point. That's a fairly reasonable average hourly rate that a joiner might charge. They might charge significantly more than that, and they might charge a bit less than that. But if they're charging around that kind of figure, they're probably bringing in a fairly average yearly wage. You know, even if they're charging £40 an hour, I would be surprised if their take-home wage is anything more than 30 grand a year, and it could be a lot less than that depending on their outgoings for the business. The cost for me to build a bespoke unit, the same as IKEA's Kallax unit, best case is 560 quid. And even then, it's not going to be as good as the IKEA unit. It's not going to have sides that are 36mm thick, because that would be a lot of extra work to make the sides that thick, and it would also add quite a lot onto the material cost as well. A more realistic price for a unit like that, fully finished and delivered, almost exactly the same as the IKEA unit, I think you're going to be looking closer to £830. As I say, I have provided a video explaining how I got to these figures over on my Patreon. So please don't argue the point in the comments if you think this is unbelievably expensive. Don't argue the point until you've watched that video. But you will have to pop onto my Patreon. It'll cost you $1 to watch the Patreon video. And if you don't want to pay to watch that, that's fine. But I explain how I got to those prices for all of my Patreon supporters. And the price of the IKEA unit, to get that Kallax unit from IKEA, £40. 40 quid. But let's also assume you're going to have to take some time off work. So you're going to have to cater for the fact that you're going to have to drive home from work and potentially back to work, you know, depending on when you're doing this. Let's assume you're just taking an afternoon off work. So let's pessimistically say it's going to take you an hour to drive home. And let's also take into account the time it takes you to drive to IKEA and pick the unit up. We'll allow a couple of hours for that. Assembly time, you're going to see how long it takes me to assemble this unit. Let's say an hour. How it would take you an hour, it's not going to take you that long, but we'll allow for an hour. So the total amount of time you're going to have to take off work is 4 hours. And the cost of the unit is £40. So if you're on £15 an hour, it's going to cost you £60 for the time you've had to take off work and £40 for the cost of the unit. So £100 overall. So, I mean, you can see it's no comparison to the cost of paying a joiner to make the unit for you. And okay, you could get a joiner to do the work for you. You could just get the joiner to go to IKEA and buy the unit for you. So in that situation, let's again, we'll say that the joiner can get to and from IKEA a little bit quicker. We'll say they're only going to do an hour, and let's say that they're going to charge an hour for the work. Cost of the unit, 40 quid. So probably looking at 120 quid, including picking the unit up, for a joiner to do this whole task for you. So in a lot of situations, you're going to be better off just telling the joiner to go to IKEA, buy the unit, bring it to you and build it for you. So let's pretend that you're on a much higher hourly rate. What sort of hourly rate do you need to be on before it's not worth your effort to build the unit yourself? And we need to get to this target figure of £560. And guess what that rate is? Well, it's relatively easy to work out. £130 an hour will take you to £560 that it would have cost you to build the unit yourself. To take the time off work, go to IKEA and assemble the unit. And even then, if we want to get up to this £830 figure, that's only really worthwhile if you're earning £200 an hour, which roughly equates to £400,000 a year salary. Now, just coming back to reality, there are many advantages to going down the route of having a bespoke unit built. So we'll just quickly look at some of the pros and cons while we're at it. The overall project time, IKEA wins hands down. It's so quick to build one of these units, unless your closest IKEA is like 5 hours away or something. It's very difficult to justify on project time for it to be any quicker for the joiner to do it. In terms of the finish of the unit, I hate to say it, but the finish of the IKEA unit is probably going to be better than anything you're going to get from a joiner, and I will explain that in the Patreon video, because there's certain challenges about this build that do actually make it quite difficult to get a really, really nice finish on the project. At the end of the day, the IKEA unit is effectively a kind of plastic melamine material, so it's going to be a really hard wearing, washable, very smooth finish on the IKEA unit. Okay, you can go down the route of getting it spray painted by a joiner, but whether or not that's going to add even more costs onto the project is anyone's guess. The big reason that you're going to get a joiner to do a project like this is for the bespoke nature. So if you need a unit that has to fit in to a particular size gap, and IKEA just don't make a unit that fits in that gap, then you've got no option but to go down the bespoke route. So absolutely, if you need a bespoke unit, getting a joiner in is probably the only option. In terms of longevity, in other words, how long's the unit going to last after it's been built, hands down the joiner's going to win here. At the end of the day, the IKEA unit is essentially made of cardboard and paper with a plastic coating over it, so it ain't going to last forever. Well, it depends how much it's getting moved around and all that sort of thing, but give it a couple of house moves. Certainly if you need to flat pack it, give it 2 or 3 flat packs at the very most, and all of the chipboard and material within the joints is just going to disappear to nothing in the IKEA unit. The professionally made unit by a joiner is probably going to last a lifetime. We touched on it before there, whether or not the unit is flat packable. If you do need to take the unit to pieces again to move house or whatever, the likelihood is a bespoke unit is probably going to come all glued together and probably won't be flat packable. I'm not saying that's a definite. There are ways and means that you can get your joiner to make the unit flat packable. That may again add extra costs onto the project. Obviously the IKEA unit is flat packable by its very nature. Go to a joiner if you are wanting to just provide local business support, and I really can't emphasize that enough. You need to be doing everything you can to support local business, providing it does make an element of financial sense. So there's got to be other good reasons to go down the joinery bespoke route other than just supporting local business, unless you've got money going spare. Oh, I've finished building the unit, by the way. And of course, maybe you're just not very good at DIY, or you just don't want to build the IKEA unit. You can't face a trip to IKEA, and you certainly don't want to be doing flat pack furniture assembly, in which case you've got the option of the bespoke route, or even just getting the joiner to go to IKEA and build it for you. In terms of after sales service, if you have any problems with the unit later down the line, say in 6 months time it's developed some sort of fault, that's going to be a bit of a pain in the neck to sort out with IKEA. You'd probably have to take the unit to bits and take it back to the store, whereas a joiner's probably just going to pop out and have a quick look at it and sort the problem out for you if it is a problem with their workmanship. So joiner definitely wins on after sales service. And then of course maybe you just simply can't get the time off work. There's plenty of people who just, they're very, very busy. They don't have time to take time off work to do flat pack assembly and whatnot, and they're more than happy to pay whatever rates the joiner charges just to get the job done for them. So you need to weigh up these pros and cons for yourself, but I hope this explains a little bit about why I, as a joiner, cannot compete with the likes of IKEA on price. Just to give you a little bit of an insight, and as I say, it's explained a bit more over on my Patreon. The materials alone for me to build a unit like this, just the material cost, what it costs me, is about £100. So no, I absolutely cannot make a bespoke unit anywhere near the price that IKEA charge. And all I would say as well is that it varies a lot depending on the complexity of the project. A little bookcase like this is actually surprisingly tricky to make, so it swings and roundabouts. I'm just using this Kallax unit as a bit of an example really, because it is staggeringly cheap for a bookcase. As I say, I'll pop this spreadsheet and a video explaining my costs over on Patreon, patreon.com/GosforthHandyman. Please support your local joiner, but please be realistic. about what they need to charge you so that they can continue to run a successful business. Thank you once again for watching, and I shall see you next time.